Welcome to the Sex Reimagined Podcast. I'm your host, Leah Piper, and I'm with my other host, Dr. Willow Brown. And we want you to make sure that you stay tuned to the very end of this episode because we've got an amazing free gift you do not want to miss.
Absolutely. Today we interviewed the one and only Debs De Vries, who is the author of The Voice, the Vulva, and the Vagus Nerve. And she describes the relationship between these parts of your body and how to manifest, how to open up into a life that works for you. So really, really powerful conversation. And we cannot wait to hear what you think.
So please tune in, turn on, and fall in love with Debs.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined Podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
Debs, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. I am thrilled to not only have you to the show, but to meet you, Debs, because I have been reading your book. You were referred to me by Nalini Blossom, a dear friend. And I'm loving the book. I'm toward the end of it right now. But the book is called The Voice, the Vulva, and the Vagus Nerve. And as a total vagus nerve dork who wants to know everything that there is to know about the vagus nerve, I'm learning new things. And it's really wonderful how you bridge, the spirituality, the physicality, and the divine feminine all together in such a beautifully woven book.
Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful welcome, Leah and Dr. Willow. And may I say, you've just made it all worthwhile. I feel tears because it's a simple book in some ways. I actually feel it's a primer, which isn't to be dismissive of what's in it, but I want to go deeper, and I had to start somewhere. And my life has been, I think, like so many of us, that want to broaden and deepen our vitality, move into our potential and feel as fully alive as we can, is bringing those things together. So, pennies drop, as we say in England. There's a gestalt. So people start to see things as really connected, and therefore perhaps are more motivated and encouraged.
Yeah, the connection between the voice and the vulva is one that, Leah and I have been teaching for a couple decades now. And it's such an unknown connection to so many.
It's unbelievably thrilling to think that we're speaking about this in this day and age, and now in these times, right? That we're pulling together between us across the globe the pieces of equipment, physical and non-physical, that are ours, that are our birthright.
Yeah, I feel like that line of connection that we have in our body is called the vagus nerve. Central channel is, more of a metaphysical term, or the yin meridian, or the conception vessel in Taoism and Chinese medicine. And it is this nerve that actually connects from our brainstem down to our heart, down to our gut. And then there are other nerve plexuses that travel even further down to connect to the womb and the cervix. And so a lot of times when we have cervical orgasms, we are igniting that vagus nerve. But there's so many ways to ignite the vagus nerve, including and to activate it, including to open up the throat. And, in my work with women over the past couple of decades, the biggest place, where do you feel that block in your body? Right here. And it's always right between the heart and the mouth, right? It's right at that throat chakra. And so, even gagging and sticking your finger back in your throat can activate the vagus nerve. And when you're healing gut issues or trauma in the body, it can be so powerful to stimulate and activate the vagus nerve. And that alignment that it connects head, heart, and gut, and, genitals as well. And so, I studied in my coaching practice, I studied multiple brain integration therapy. And that is all about finding coherence, like getting your heart, your head, and your gut all on the same page. And that's really what you're speaking to, is to make those choices and those decisions of which direction to go in life from a coherent place in your body. And if you're not feeling it, pause and wait until you can feel that.
Thank you. You just summarized it. It is coherence. And it's in as well trying to break down some of the ideas, the societal, cultural, and embodied ideas about what coherence is. And I think in some ways we can support people in finding it, but when you know it in your body, it's unmistakable for you. And that's what encourages people like you and Leah and me and millions of others, no doubt, to follow their inner knowing. Attach to your values, of course, to approach the world in a way that you hold yourself in a way that aligns with the values you've espoused as a human, but that inner knowing that can make a life look very different to people who are living within their paradigm of what they, conformity to the structures they've been told are the best for them. And we're seeing a lot of breakdown around that right now.
A lot.
So I want to back up just a little bit, Debs, and I want to know, how would you describe your work? And then how did you get into your work?
My work is a devotion to the liberation of women into their greatest potential from midlife onwards. How I got into it, Leah, my mother died at 51. And although I didn't realize that, she had ovarian cancer. Her twin sister died a year later in Australia of breast cancer. And then her daughter died of ovarian cancer, my cousin. And I always have done, walk in the field since I was a little girl. I grew up in rural Staffordshire in England, in the middle of a very small village. And I would turn to nature for my answers. Always. I used to lie on my back and look at the stars and say, I know you're trying to say something, but I can't understand you. There was this sense of needing a dialogue. So going back to my mother's death, I struggled with the question, well, does nature just use up women and then chuck them away like a dirty old Kleenex when they've done the productive years? And it looked like it, particularly bearing in mind I was born in 1956. So, grandmothers were always grey perms. I mean, there'd be no grandmother that looked like me unless she was, completely outside the pale. And there was this very set world that I saw, a village life, an all-girls school, my father choosing my career for me. I mean, but none of it sat with me. And I think that's what I'm talking about, that sort of divine restlessness, that this just isn't true. But I didn't set out to make that my work. That was just a background question. There's two. So the other strand is I had a professional career where I would be advising companies, quite large companies, on people and mission development, and also writing programs and delivering them. So I was, exec board down to hands-on with the newbies everywhere. And in 1999, I had a horse. And a lady I met at the stable yard where I kept him said to me, oh, we've got a Reiki master coming to my house on Sunday. Would you like to come? I think I thought she meant sushi, honestly.
Sure, I like fish.
I'm coming. I just said, I'm coming. Thereby hangs a tale. So that was the start of a step into understanding subtle energy, which continued at quite a pace. I was also doing a lot of yoga, and I moved into tango. I woke up one morning from a profound dream, and I've had half a dozen really profound dreams that have changed my direction. And I had to give up work and learn tango. Thereby hangs a big old tale. So I got these two strands going on. The energy work was building. I couldn't walk into a corporate environment in a suit anymore. By 2012, I was divorced. I was desperate to get a job so I could pay my house bills, all sorts of things. And I was offered a good corporate job. And I thought, come on, Deb, it's this or the poorhouse, get on with it. But it wouldn't hold. And I couldn't hold that position and be well. So I gave it up. And a month later, I had a dream. And in the dream, there were 4 beautifully wrapped gifts. And my inner voice said, you've got gifts physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Now you must take them to midlife women.
Mm.
And I struggled out of bed. You know that, maybe you don't, but I'm standing there a bit dozy, looking for my underwear. I'm going, but how does it all fit together? And straight away, it was there. Chiron, Kundalini, all these words dropped in, things I knew, but needed to go boom. So that's what I did. I went downstairs and thought, make an event, do a weekend, see what happens. So that's where that started.
And so in this event, in your first event, and I'm sure it's grown and you've, dialed it over time. Can you explain what the cornerstones, what was this event? What were people looking for that had them say yes to attending your event?
In 2015, midlife and menopause weren't the conversation they are today. So the title of the event was Menopause Magic. They've got 2 good words there. And what they were looking for was an alternative route for those women that are already, should we just say spiritually seeking, have done, self-inquiry, perhaps into yoga. There was a stirring within them that their inner being answered to. And the cornerstone was bringing together, particularly at the age of 48 to 52, the Chiron return, the upsurge of Kundalini, the impact of Kundalini in the psyche and in the physical and emotional system, and things to support them so they could hold a bigger understanding of the passage than they might already have had.
Can you explain to our audience what that means, Chiron and Kundalini?
I would love to. Chiron is a centaur planet. He was rediscovered by an electron telescope on the southeast coast of America on the 1st of November, 1977. A centaur, as I'm sure we all have seen or thought of them, represents divine and human, divine and animal, you could almost say. Chiron's got a big history in Greek, but when Chiron's physicality was seen again in our skies, 1977, there wasn't an awful lot of self-healing going on. As psychology had been the biggest modality, but there it was. And suddenly, through America, things began to pour into the consciousness and the awareness, massage, essences.
All the gestalts and all these alternative healing modalities and somatic therapies are giving birth for the first time.
Everything.
Yeah.
77, right? So when I was born, it wasn't in my chart. I was 21 at the time. Chiron represents a passage, a very interesting passage. And he moves between the inner planets. So let's just sort of say first half of life, or the things we need to do to set our life up. And then there's a strange elliptical movement that he makes. And the planets outside of this little dwarf, if you like, are Saturn and Uranus. So more energy, more uniqueness, more of that electrode, just had an idea, more form. The idea being that we have to perfect, if you like, and that doesn't mean to be perfect, a piece of work within us that our soul is calling us to do. And that is often referred to as the Chiron wound. I'm not keen on the idea of wound because I like to steer away from the idea that we are wounded. I believe we're always in process, and our processes, will bring us up against very uncomfortable and unpleasant events in the body and in the outside life. But when I've tapped into the chirotic energy, is what we call it, what I've also seen always makes me want to weep. It's so beautiful that over lifetimes, and actually I don't think it's linear, but just let's say we've been around forever, and in different experiences we've built gifts and talents. We've built and built and built gifts and talents, and there may be one place that we haven't tackled, we've avoided, but rather like the inevitability of a branch popping out of a trunk of a tree, at some point, which I call a stage of spiritual maturation, your soul goes, right, this is the lifetime, we're going to do it. And it's a way of bringing down this left, right brain, Saturn, Uranus energy. It's a way of overcoming what they call the wound, but I prefer to think of as a sort of place we have just not really wanted to go. And the reasons for that are actually, though people don't want to hear it, they're not important. The important thing is that when you go there and you start to work with that pain, if we can describe it as that, your gifts and talents birth, because the very thing that you've been avoiding is the way that you're going to bring those gifts and talents into your life, into other people's lives. And the learning is, for me, is like, you don't cure the wound. You just get to know when it's there, like a monkey on your shoulder. It's like, oh, it's my wound again. And for me, that always means, okay, that means you've got to do the thing you don't want to do. You go and talk to that group. My wound, if you like, is in groups. So
Speaking to groups.
Yeah.
And then you went and started doing groups.
Well, exactly.
There you go.
And that was still a safe place for me, because when I was teaching, it was still a safe place because I had that little bit of teacher going on and I was managing the group. But me in a group, no.
So let me see if I got this right. Chiron is basically the invitation that arises when the impulse goes, I got to take a look at the things I'm uncomfortable with. I'm being called to explore and be an inquiry with the traumas from the past, the stories that don't serve, the things that keep me small instead of allowing myself to shine. And if I'm brave enough, if I listen to the call of Chiron, I dig in for that courage, and what will be unlocked is like the next big expansion.
Wow.
Me being more of myself.
Very well articulated.
Leah, you just said something so magical. You said unlock.
Mm-hmm.
The symbol that the astronomers gave Chiron is a key. And
of course. It took me a minute to have that drop in.
Well,
yes. So
it's a key.
The key. Right on.
It's a master key. It has an energetic signature that can, I'm pushing boundaries perhaps of people's beliefs here, but it's been true for me, that can impact at the level of the DNA.
So is Chiron specific to, let's say, an astrological chart at a certain age? Is that why it's a part of your ecosystem as it relates to menopause? Or can Chiron come into anyone's field at any age?
Chiron's always in your field because he'll be in some house or the other. But the big return, i.e. when it kind of comes back to that moment when you were born, the Chiron return, 48 to 52. So very fundamentally important in my work. And the only reference in the West I could find to it was Carl Jung, of course, who went to India for 3 months and came back and wrote about, not so much about Chiron, but about Kundalini psychosis. And when I thought of what Kundalini can do, and when I thought of what Chiron can do, and realized the power of those two combined at those particular ages, specifically, I ran downstairs and thought, I better start helping people, because, this idea of pouring petrol onto a bonfire was just so huge in my mind. No wonder people are going crazy,
Okay, beautiful. So now let's go to Kundalini.
Kundalini is described in various ways, and it's a little bit difficult to give it a complete Western definition because it's one of those beautiful Sanskrit terms that don't quite translate into our cultural understanding. I like to think of it as an energy source that has different iterations in the human body, but very specifically at midlife, it starts to power up in a whole new way, and its movement is upwardly vertical. And its power wants to increase at this point. It's programmed to increase. And as the power increases and it moves upwards, it's moving through the human chakratic system. In other words, it's activating the subtle power centers that are transducing energy from the cosmos to the meridians in the human body, because it wants to increase their, let's call it voltage. And it needs, in order to do that, it has to debug programs that are no longer cannot support it.
Yeah,
That's
it's like
the
a
best way I can put it.
purification system. It kind of blasts through
Yeah, rewiring.
conditioned responses that are both conscious and unconscious and subconscious and all the consciousnesses.
It's a piece of the cosmic intelligence, and it's just
Yeah.
that's what it's going to do, because it's as energy spirals upwards, we get, as you know, I'm sure, opportunities to make evolutionary leaps within our own lives. So, the Saturn return at 29. At 44, Uranus versus Uranus. Then we get a little break. Oh, thank you very much. And then along comes Chiron, right? Are you guys ready for this? If you've done your Uranus versus Uranus work, which I wish that would help a lot, then there wouldn't be so much to do at the Chiron point. But there you go. That's where we are. And the action of Kundalini is, as you say, is purifying. It's vivifying. So what I teach now
It's
more,
awakening and it's enlightening. So a lot of people, when they hear Kundalini, there's oftentimes a relationship to enlightenment. People whose Kundalini awakens and then they have states of enlightenment, which really just means they're lighter.
Well,
Yes,
and their
I like that.
perception
Burdened
changes. Yeah, their
by the
perception on life
stories.
shifts. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love this. It's vivifying. That's beautiful.
it's vivifying. And you're absolutely right. People have an experience, but having an initiation isn't the same as embodying it.
Right.
Right.
And,
Good point. Good distinction.
what happens in many cases is that the initiation of that energy can lead to misperception of what's happening.
Yeah. A lot of circuits can get blown out.
A lot can get blown out. A lot of missteps can be taken because the person thinks it's this and it's that and it's outside of me and I'm going to do this and I can't. It's a very confusing. And I have a certain amount of psychic perception. Well, I've actually got quite a lot. And I saw how the construct of the human ego, the hologram of that, also plays a part. I mean, it plays a part all the time. But because I saw one doing it once, I'm like, oh my God, it has energy tentacles, is the best way I can put it, into the solar plexus, into Manipura, which isn't surprising. But again, this passage from the solar plexus, which is what Kundalini is helping us to do, through the Chiron point, which is between the heart and here. Again, if the ego isn't balanced, if we aren't in some form of surrender to the life force, if we aren't humble enough and willing enough to listen, that energy just stays in the negative aspects of ego, because the brain helps it to do that. It shunts it, is the best way I can put it, rather than the energy, the pre-language energy, moving through, and us with the vagus nerve being able to interpret it. It goes through a different system, solar plexus and central nervous system, and we have a thought like that, right? We check out, I don't know what this is. It's you, it's me, it's this, it's that. So the whole process of becoming coherent, understanding how to be in a relaxed state. People don't like the word relaxed. I'm like, it doesn't mean passive, guys. It doesn't mean you're lying around with your face full of marshmallows every day. It's an opening. It's a way of being. So I hope that's a little bit helpful and not confusing, but that's the way we're made, right? I will just say one thing that you probably know, but I want to add about Kundalini, because some people might be saying, well, how come this only just really happens then? One of the things to note is that in the lower two chakras, there are gates that allow Kundalini in, and it flows out with the menstrual flow, when it's not used to build placenta.
Mhm.
So one of those gates begins to close at around 44, 45 years old,
Due to
which,
perimenopause?
and estrogen's going, but guess what? Kundalini's going, hello,
Oh, interesting.
don't worry. That's my view. And I'm not medical, so God knows,
Yeah.
what people make of that. But the fact from an esoteric point of view is, it makes sense. Kundalini is pretty much always there. And it needs to be there to sustain new life, right? And then it's not needed for that anymore. The program is for you to have a new life.
Right. And that's why so
Ding,
many
ding.
women who are going through perimenopause, they no longer have the capacity to sort of handle the things they used to handle, because they're like, fuck that. I don't have the time. I don't have the space. I don't have the capacity. I'm going to go create a new life for myself. And this is so often when divorces happen and things short circuit in life, because as you're talking about, these are very interesting. These two gates in the second chakra. I've never thought about that before, but it makes a lot of sense. It's like when the blood, the life force, the potential life, those eggs are no longer being released down to the earth, then they are then going up back. Like the energy is going, not the eggs, but the energy is going back up into you and giving you this new perspective and this new opportunity to rewire and rebuild your life in a way that works for you now.
Completely. And if I could just add to something from my experience to that, I always say to women, your band of tolerance is going to get really tight. It's just like, it's going to get tight, and it needs to get tight, because you now have the process of sifting and sorting. But as you said, sometimes there's a lot of short circuiting. So the business skills that I learned, that I used to teach, all kinds of people, I realized when I was looking at those skills, these are really useful skills. Rather than crashing and burning your life, which might happen, you might want to, but what if you had a set of skills that would actually serve you for the rest of your life? And even if this partnership doesn't hold, you've learned a new narrative, a new dialogue, so that rather than, fuck it, I'm out of here, we're negotiating, we're lobbying for our needs, we're helping the next generation take their part of the teamwork in the home. Women say to me, I've got nobody to help me. I'm like, how old are your kids? They go, oh, I can't ask them. Oh, yes, you can, lady. And you should. How old are they? Oh, they're only 13 and 15.
Perfect age for them to start helping.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a bit late by my book, but yeah, get going, get going. Because actually, if you do it well, they like to be included. They start to feel themselves as responsible, as part of a unit, learning useful skills. I'd be shamed if my son had come back from university with a bag of dirty washing. I would not be happy.
Yeah.
And yet it's a bit of a badge of honor. Oh, he's come home again with his dirty washing. I'm like, right. I'm not turning a boy out like that for a woman in my world.
Right.
Yeah. So Leah and I are both at this conjunction point, this age 44, 45 of like where what you're speaking to is the Uranus return, correct? Is that correct? And
Yes,
so
yes.
can you share a little bit like Saturn return? If you know anything about astrology, it's like these planets have big life lessons to offer us. So Saturn is, big life lessons. What are you here to learn in life? And it comes around our charts every 30 years. So we have our Saturn return when we're in our 30s, and that's a 28, 29, 30 is when a lot of people are like, what the fuck am I doing? And things go haywire for a few years. And then you kind of get back on track again. And now we're speaking to this next return, which is the Uranus return. And Uranus is, related to the sign Aquarius, so which I am. So, and Leah has Aquarius sun, and so I think of
the rising.
rising. Sorry, yeah, Aquarius rising, and so I think about Uranus as this sort of like planet of big understanding, bigger consciousness, bigger conception, bigger overview, because that's kind of what Aquarius holds, like the humanitarian overview. Like how are we weaving with the collective, and what are we offering to the world? So, I just want to maybe pause with that and get your wisdom on how can someone in this age range and this Uranus return, kind of be present and work, find meaning, so that when they come to this Chiron return in the, around the early 50s, it's easier.
Great question. God, I love speaking with you women. Yes, Uranus, Aquarius, expansion, global. But first of all, we have to understand how capable we are of working with energy and to provide a stable environment for that energy when it comes. And that happens through, at a physiological level, the endocrine system, and at another level, the emotional system. So Uranus versus Uranus at this octave of our being human, our just coming into this, we've done the Saturn stuff. Maybe we've got the job, we've got the house, we've grounded ourselves, we're learning the lessons. The question at this point for me is, are you emotionally capable? Are you emotionally fluent? How do you manage your emotions? Can you name them? Can you claim them? Can you use them in a constructive way? Because these levels of power that come are, as all power is, are capable of destruction. They're capable of destroying you psychically, psychologically. People have amazingly brilliant ideas, and it can drive them crazy because their emotional life isn't stable enough. By that I mean it's learning for me to broaden out everything you know about yourself. So it really is one of those first lessons of Physician Heal Thyself, to know thyself, because until we really know ourselves, that level of wisdom and the access it gives you can bounce back. So how do you deal with anger? Do you know you're angry? I meet a lot of women who just don't know they're angry. Haven't really
I know.
felt.
I know when I am.
Do you know one? Good.
Yeah, and I love what you're speaking to, because it's anger is such an uncomfortable emotion for women. They usually will default to depression or grief or some other emotion that's more comfortable and societally accepted. And so I think that, do you guys know that they have rage rooms these days where you can go and like throw shit and break shit and just like get your anger out? And I think, who is it? Mama Gina has this like swamping thing that she talks about, so there's all these different ways that we can release our anger these days, and instead of bottling it in, because that is then going to affect our soul return, right? This Chiron soul purpose return planet later on in life.
Completely. Well, let me see if I have this right. So it sounds like, again, there's an invitation to take ownership of your emotions, right? But it sounds like there's actually a maturation process to all of this, that it's not just about, oh, I just get to have my emotions. It's, I get to own and recognize my emotions, and I'm mature enough to clean up a mess when I've made one.
Yeah.
It's not just being willy-nilly about all your emotions. It's actually being wise and purposeful and responsible, and to be able to articulate what's important to you about your emotions. You set boundaries, the way that you create limits, the things that you say no to because it's not a match. You don't want to be thrown into fucking chaos anymore. It sounds like you have enough emotional awareness to have the autonomy and the agency to consciously sign up for what is in alignment for you versus what you're no longer going to endure because you want to be a good girl in everybody's eyes.
Amen.
But you also don't need to like throw a tantrum
Well,
to go, fuck
absolutely.
you know? It's like, what
Unless
is
you're in a
it?
rage room and you just want
Yeah,
out of
Yeah,
it.
right.
I hope somebody's energy cleaning that regularly.
Right,
But
or like when someone really breaks your boundaries, you allow yourself to be upset and to stand for them. In that case, sometimes a rage storm has to blow over.
and it does.
Or you make a mistake and you make a giant ass mess and you blow everybody out of the water, but you now know how to clean it up and take responsibility for that, and then shift the frequency of whether or not that happens.
You're so
Yes?
right. And
Am I on the track?
Absolutely, because there's a process of alchemy that we can run, which is what we're really talking about at the level of this. So for me, completely, we take responsibility. What could that look like? First of all, you said it, awareness. Am I angry? Am I a little bit annoyed? Or am I so fucking pissed off I could rip somebody's head off? You know, where are you on that scale? Because they're all biochemically different. What are you going to do now you know that?
Right.
And what I always advocate is don't project. Don't project.
How do you help people break that habit? Because so many times people go into projection unconsciously.
Yeah. If they come to me, it's probably because they're in a loop of projection. You know, I yelled, they yelled, we're yelling.
Yeah.
So the first position is to get past the story and take them into their body to find anger. Usually, and you'll hear this a lot, I don't know what I feel. I'm just numb.
Really?
I don't feel like talking to them about it. I'm not interested in sex anymore. You know, we were getting on great. Okay, let's just unwind a bit and see what's really going on. And there's a very simple tool I use is, you've probably done it. It's from the African yoga tradition, and it's called wood chopper. It's really good for that. I mean,
I love the wood chopper.
When you've done that 3 times and you stand there, you're
I'm not familiar with the wood chopper.
So much better. You stand like with your feet wide, and you do like a squat but keeping your spine straight. So you're just coming straight up and down, and you just chop wood, and you go ha every time. Ha, really loud. It's
and the solar plexus snaps up. So you're moving the energy. You want to feel it in your heart. You want the biochemistry to run. So there's a vivification, and when you felt it, the need to project it pretty much disappears because you're it now. You're not trying to get rid of it and give it to somebody else. And it feels to me always, now I can go and say to somebody, we need to talk. I was really angry, but because I'm talking with that biochemistry in my body rather than going in for an attack from a defensive or victim mode, they feel it. That they don't need to be told because their body will pick up that signal. She's angry, but she's not going to attack. She's just angry. Let's listen to her. And
that's
so
beautiful.
That's alchemy. You know, that's a form of alchemy. You're transforming these vibrations that have been calibrated in you. The triggers, of course, it's a trigger. So the important thing is to understand that you're now experiencing something that could be calibrated at any frequency band, really. Think about it. You know, you could get a trigger and have an orgasm, right? It's just like, oh, they were so angry with me. That was gorgeous. Depending on how that energy had already been stored. I mean,
okay, so let's bridge this to sex. Let's bridge this to intimacy and sexual relationships. What does all this have to do with sex?
Sex is the primal creative force, and I think the same thing applies. It's how do we amplify it and manage it in a responsible way so that we can create greater networks of pleasure, which is highly important within ourselves and within the worlds we inhabit. And sex and sensuality are huge gateways to that. I'd probably broaden it to sensuality to include sex, because there's a sensuality to feeling your feelings in a healthy way, right? That just happens. yourself, if you're around somebody who's holding something in, they're feeling a bit bitter, resentful, or lonely, that's not sexy.
No.
Having an argument with somebody and trying to tell them they're right, in a relationship, that's not sexy. But owning your own feelings and going and presenting them and explaining what your needs are in that moment and whether they can, are they going to step and meet them, that becomes sexy because the magnetism is running. You're presenting yourself as a whole person, not as somebody who needs something from the other person.
Well, it also seems like this process that you're speaking to is like you're freeing yourself up, because we're usually doing one of two things. We're either suppressing and people pleasing, or we're just kind of out of control. Everything's just flying out sideways. We're looking to be corralled. And so it's like both are kind of not great options. And so it feels either like very depressive or very chaotic. And it seems like when you're talking about this alchemizing thing, that it frees up the system. You're able to like discharge and relax in a specific way. And if you can realize that some of the most potent energy we have in our system is derived from the sex center, it's also very creative in nature. So you're harnessing creativity, you're harnessing a lot of energy, you're becoming very intentional, right? It's like instead of just like you're holding a bow and arrow and you pull back on the string, and instead of just aiming, not having an aim, like suddenly you have a bullseye and you can let go. And in that letting go, you free yourself. And then like pleasure becomes so much easier. You're not like all squashed in. You're not super tight, preventing and being unmagnetic to the pleasures that are awaiting for you to like yum, 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 yum. Enjoy this beautiful life and this beautiful body that we're so privileged to inhabit.
Beyond anything. And absolutely, Tantra, Tanyoti, expansion.
Yeah.
What does that look like in a person's life? Where are we compressed, shriveled, defensive, aggressive,
right,
unattractive in
yes.
the original sense of the word,
Yeah.
The
Not
idea
magnetic.
of attraction being, are you in look 1, 2, or 3? I believe there's only about 3 looks kicking around in the Western world at the moment. It's like, that isn't what it's about. The body will find attractiveness where it feels, safe and wanted and welcome and ready for expansion. And yes, we know there are shades of that and people doing different things, but those different things aren't sustainable in the same way.
Well, it kind of reminds me of like the essence or the spirit of turn on. Like I'm not referring to like turn on as like being horny. I'm talking about being turned on.
Like Eros
being
for an
lit
orange
up,
or Eros
being
for a book.
opened, being in the world and choosing to be lit up, like making a conscious choice to live a life filled with turn on. And we can be turned on by nature. We can be turned on by babies laughing and giggling. I was just with my little niece who's 6 months old, and it was like, how is this little creature that doesn't even know how to talk captivate the whole damn room by just wobbling her little pudgy limbs? You know what I mean? Like, why do we find that so incredibly delightful and fascinating? Like, what a turn on it was to bask in her vividness, like. So am I headed in the right direction that this is a part of the alchemy that happens as people start to feel lit up?
To master themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the first pass is know thyself. And then it's now I'm beginning to know myself. What do I do? And those deep questions. Am I manipulate? What's my intention behind what's coming out of my mouth? Coming back to the voice, or what's my intention behind withholding? Understanding the way we use power.
So now let's bridge that to this whole vagus nerve piece. Because one of the things I think is really interesting about the vagus nerve is it's one of the ways that people who have spinal injuries can still have orgasms. Because it's the only nerve that we're aware of that runs from the front of the body, from the genitals up to the brain, that allows us to run in orgasmic sensations instead of going through the spine, which I think is like, God, what a miraculous design. And so I don't know why I'm saying that. I guess I'm just throwing that into the conversation. But how does all of this relate now to this vagus nerve?
Well, let's start with just a very quick thing. For me, yes, the difference between the central nervous system and the vagus nerve is it's yin and yang, if you like. It's electromagnetic. And when the vagus nerve is constantly under stress and picking up signals of stress, cortisol, the internal signals, as well as its job, which is monitoring externals, and it has a conversation with the adrenals and all the rest of it that's going on. It's very, very, very hardworking. And while that state can become so familiar, it feels normal. When people, and I'm sure you teach this a lot, don't have an experience of pleasure or comfort or safety, they don't have a datum point. Their life feels like that, right? It feels like that. This is the way to be. You can't trust anyone, don't relax and enjoy yourself. Whatever they see or feel is filtered because the vagus nerve isn't able to relax enough to give them a broad range of signals to see things from a relaxed standpoint. That person wasn't glowering at you. They were just looking, the sun was in their eyes. That person was smiling at you because you're pretty. It's like all those filters. The vagus nerve is snake to me. It's like that muscle. It's like 90% muscle. It's a sensing organ. It's sensory. So when we don't allow it to be sensory, when we will only listen to the signals that come up at, a picosecond or whatever it is, from the base to the brain, we're in that sort of forward-going reactive place. So the teaching for the vagus nerve is to balance that. It's not to have one without the other. Is to understand that once you realize you're in a contracted state, how does a person know that? It's for some, it's when their life just gets so intolerable, they reach out for help very often, or there's a major life crisis or a health crisis. Those tend to be the ways the body gets noticed, right? Once they can find and trust someone who can explain to them, your experience isn't the whole of the experience you could be having. That there's a lot more. And if you can and want to walk that path, the path of sensuality, of relaxation, of living very broadly and making great choices from that rather than these same narrow band of choices, you're going to have to work with the vagus nerve.
Yeah, there's a level of safety that has to be experienced in order to. It's sort of a cyclical thing. It's like if we can create safety, then we can experience safety. That will open up your receptive channel. In Chinese medicine, the vagus nerve and the yin meridian, which runs right down through the front midline of the body, are synonymous. And so that we also call that yin meridian, we call it the receptive channel. And that I think that's really the divine feminine's greatest superpower, is to receive. And so much of our young dominant culture is going out and getting, going out and achieving, go make it happen, make, do, get.
Grasping.
And to not negate that, because there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of good in that. We want to go out and get, but we also want to be able to sit back and receive. And I think that's one of the most really, really powerful things about having a relationship with your vagus nerve, especially through sensuality, through sexuality, as you keep pointing to, Debs, is like feeling your way through life rather than always thinking your way through life. And raise your hand if you know that you lead with your prefrontal cortex over your heart. So many of us do. And it's partially because we're swimming in the water of that. That's what our culture is made up of. So of course we're going to get wet, but the practices that you outline in your book really help to rewire somebody's physicality so that they can feel their way through life, so that they can awaken that receptive vessel or that receptive channel within. And
let's talk about some of those practices so that this becomes practical, right? Because many people who are listening don't know how to get in touch with their vagus nerve. They're not even sure where their vagus nerve is. They don't know, like, okay, I notice I'm triggered. Now what?
Yeah, let's make it doable for them today. What can someone do in their life right now today if they find themselves in a contracted, stressed, not open state?
How will they know? How do they know? And that sounds oversimplistic, but, ask yourself the question, what do I do? How do I become? Where in my body am I suddenly conscious that I'm holding tension or holding words back? So start to internally search around your body. You need that piece of information. And then, of course, it's the breath, right? It's the very next breath, because when we move the diaphragm, we're going to touch the emotions. We're going to bring those emotions back towards the heart. Coming back to emotional mastery, of course, your ego doesn't want you to do that. So it's a moment of self-awareness. Am I contracted? Do my shoulders hurt? Am I gritting my teeth? What am I doing? Am I fist clenched? Because we have to pay attention to ourselves. And that's a loving act, right? It's paying attention to the inner, not just the inner being, but the animal being of us, this highly intelligent system. To begin that dialogue, you just take a couple of deep breaths and push those receptors in the lungs, and suddenly you might feel a difference. And it's tiny little things like, I noticed a difference. What happened? We're self-informing now. When I pause and see where I am and what I'm doing and become aware, suddenly that very narrow moment starts to widen. Because what do we want? Spaciousness, expansion. When I do that and I take 3 deep breaths, what happened? What if I gave up for a moment the need to control the next thing? What if I just focused on myself for a minute and not the situation? What would I learn?
I had a moment today. I'm the techie of every experience in my life. Everyone in my life has a hard time with technology almost, and my husband specifically. So he's having a password issue. Whenever he has a password issue, it is stop immediately whatever I'm doing and run and solve the problem. And oh, by the way, he's pissed off at it. So his tone directed to me isn't, would you please help me? It's, this doesn't work. So, and I'm pretty patient, but today I wasn't. I was pissed off of being interrupted. I was pissed off that I wasn't asked politely. And then I was pissed off that I didn't get any gratitude. And so, and it wasn't like, normally I'm so much more patient than this. But today it was like the accumulation of every single time this has happened. And so I really lashed out, and I am cursing, and my voice is raised, and I am pissing and moaning. I'm slamming shit down. And I'm thinking, he's like, what is going on with you? Because now I'm overreacting.
Like he's never seen you react like that before.
Right, but I know
your estrogen levels might be low, Leah.
Well, they probably are. But I knew as it was happening, I'm flooded. I'm flooded, and I don't have all my resources available to react in the way that would feel good to me. So instead, like the judgments start coming, like I'm being hypocritical. I'm now reacting in a way that's like I'm mad at him for reacting, and now I'm reacting bigger, as if to somehow get back at him more. And I just said, I can't keep talking about this because I can't get rid of this tone of voice. If I keep talking about it, I have to get out of flooded mode. Yeah, so just give me a minute so that I can talk to you like a reasonable human being and not someone who's filled with contempt. And it's so uncomfortable, right? And it's like the labels arise that wants to be very judgmental towards myself. And so I noticed that, and I just kind of breathed some space, like you were just saying. It was like, let me love and respect myself enough to actually have the space I need to recalibrate, and then come back to the table and go, that was a regrettable moment. I wish I had reacted differently. Here's how this would feel better in the future. And this is the accumulation of things that I haven't said over the years because I want to be helpful and easygoing and not demanding and controlling. So every once in a while, the tsunami comes over and there's a regrettable reaction. Now, can I have a kiss? And then
You,
it took him a moment, right? To
yeah.
like give me a reluctant kiss, but and then I gave him a little bit of space. And then a half hour, I got a genuine kiss, which I appreciated.
There you go.
But it takes those times. It takes breath. It takes being able to talk back to your thoughts of judgment, whether that is like blaming yourself or blaming someone else, and then like to kind of come out of the blame game and go, permission to be human.
Yeah. I wonder,
And
Debs, go ahead.
sorry, I was just
Go
going to,
ahead.
I wanted to lobby a little point that you so powerfully described there. Without that, and even with that, it's my hormones. It's not me. Oh, it's her hormones. And that's when some of the really messy stuff kicks off, because hormones are just messengers, right? They're just biochemistry happening in your body. And when we, as you described, built up something and suddenly this hormonal change starts to happen, we can very often act. I remember thinking, this isn't me. And then I thought, but it is. That was you that went downstairs and pulled the phone out of the wall. And like, it wasn't anybody else, was it? You know, it's
right.
But because we are not socialized in a way that helps us to even earlier, like some of the younger ones are now, preempt those by being who we need to be from the off, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does build up. And then you get, as you say, a beautiful tsunami. But then there's that shaking of heads and going, well, you know, it's her age. And it's not. At its fundamental level, it's not your age. It's just that you've reached the age where it's not going to, what you've been isn't what nature wants for you anymore. Didn't in the first place.
You know, it will
That's
be
really helpful.
interesting. It will be interesting to see these generations that are coming up behind Leah and I, who are being given a lot more permission in a lot of ways to be more authentic and to be more of themselves and to explore what that means on all levels, sexually and otherwise. And it will be fascinating to see what, you know, shakes out with them when their ovaries start to take their final bow and, you know, their adrenals have to kick in. Also, knowing that they've been raised in a generation that has a lot more cortisol kicking, you know, and a lot more comparing mind going on due to all the social media and stuff. So it'll just be interesting to see. Debs, I wonder if you could close us out with like guiding us through a practice. There's one in your book that I love. It's where you draw these silver strands of light down through your right side and your left side through your womb and into the earth.
Now, that'll be one of the transference healing one. There's the golden thread, but that takes quite a long time. I don't think we'll have time for that this time.
Whatever you think is like digestible for our audience.
The one I'd like to share, and it comes from Transference Healing, which is anchored and channeled and looked after by a remarkable woman called Alexis Cartwright. So I'm acknowledging her. One that I go to times a day is called the Feeling Vortex Cleaning Procedure. And this can be found in her book, Beyond Doorways. When I first started Transference, this stuff wasn't published, but of course times have changed, right? Your feeling vortex is a chakratic system above the one we're most familiar with. So it's the point at which light and sound enter, and then they split to become solar plexus and womb chakra. So the feeling vortex, if you like, if you were to imagine it, you know, I usually put my hands somewhere around my belly button-ish area and just feel for a bit of density. It doesn't matter if people feel it or not, because it's going to happen. And I'm going to probably help most by standing up. I don't know if you can see me well enough. So I'm going to start by setting an intention. So why I'm doing this is because we collect a lot of energetic junk, both through the birth process and in our daily life through sexual practice. And that biochemical energy can get really stuck here. Other people's stuff we don't want. People coming in at us emotionally will come in through this vortex. So I hold a diamond shape and I just say to myself, I hold the intention to shut down to energetic interference. And I just twist it a little bit. So I want to close it because for a lot of women, particularly, this is very, very open. It happens through the birthing process. It doesn't close down properly, all kinds of stuff. And I just reach in and I can feel now like little strands. And again, it's just something that comes with practice. It's more of a felt thing where perhaps I've walked around. I've been very close physically with somebody today. You know, we might have exchanged some energy there, sub the level of my consciousness. And to keep me being me, I don't want that. But it's not releasing the relationship. It's meaning more energy can come to my heart so I can live from here. And then I'm going to close it down to the size of a dime. And with my left hand, which is going out, I'm going to imagine a ball of white light, pure source energy. And what we've been talking about, in a sense, is resourcing, right? And I'm going to point a finger, that's my power finger, and I'm going to bring that white energy in. It'll move, it's just moving itself. And I'm counting down from 100 to 0 because I need to resource that part of my body. In women, it gets incredibly depleted. Like you said, Dr. Willow, we weep before we feel angry. You know, all that emotional energy is pouring out. So we need to keep it tight. And these simple, beautiful things that people can learn from the book. They can go to a teacher. There's plenty of transference teachers in America. I'll be there myself later this year.
Remind us the name of your book.
The book's called The Voice, the Vulva, and the Vagus Nerve.
Lovely. And in closing, is there any wisdom you want to share with our audience around sensuality, sex, and pleasure?
If you're not getting it, it's not that you're broken. It's that you're just not yet, haven't been allowed to tap into the deep healing, beauty, importance of this. Don't deny yourself this opportunity in the human body to experience the deep pleasure that you are designed for. You know, that the quickest way to say to somebody is, you're not broken. You haven't had an orgasm. That's not your fault. Your body knows how. Please don't deny yourself and allow the joy of being in the body. Even if you don't believe it right now, part of you will know that there's something that you're not having. And if you're having beautiful sensuality, increase it. Keep going. Do more. Find more ways.
Thank you. And you have a beautiful gift for our audience. Discover your shadow saboteur. This is a quiz that helps to identify the shadow aspect impacting your decisions. And where can we find that?
That's on my website. It'll be the first page you come to. And it's a simple enough thing, but, you know, it's taken me years, I suppose, to help people understand that what's making the decision isn't always who you think it is.
Conscious. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Beautiful.
Debs, thank you so much for all your wisdom and for sharing with us today. It was such a pleasure, such an honor to have you on the show.
It's an honor to be asked. It's an honor to be given the space to share with people that I hope I touch somebody with something and I'm in awe of your work. I'm inspired by you both tremendously. I know where there's women like you in the world, we'll go in the right direction.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And now up next is the dish. So please stay tuned.
Now, our
Leah,
favorite
you
part.
just said something so magical. You said,
well, that was a very fun, esoteric episode.
Yeah. I love the esoteric realm.
I'm like, you should have a podcast just doing esoteric stuff because that is so your happy place.
I know. It's great. Well, I just think that there's, and sometimes I want to say too, sometimes I get fatigued by the esoteric realm because I'm like trying to follow what the hell they're saying. If I'm with them, you know, it's like, okay, good. But if it's like, this is a bunch of hoo-ha, I have that side of me too. Probably comes from my mom, but,
That's all right.
but, But yeah, I mean, for over 20 years, I've been teaching women about their connection between their voice and their vulva, and so to really bring in the soul, that was the big thing that I really got from the book was how the vagus nerve aligns with the soul purpose and that soul calling, and how there is a deep connection and relationship, not just in the physicality of our bodies, of how if we open our throat, we open our expression, we open our hearts, then yes, it's easier for us to open our genitals to receive more love into our lives. That is more of it feels like more of a physical, although emotional and spiritual as well. But then there was this soul thing that came in through
Oh,
the
interesting.
connection of the vagus nerve that really felt like a piece that I had never considered before. So you just don't know what you don't know until you start until someone opens you up to it. So I loved that.
I loved her use of the word vivid. What was it?
Vivid.
Vivification or something like that.
Vivification. Yeah.
Vivification. I was like, ooh.
That was a good new
Yeah,
word.
like
Yeah.
it feels like being filled with a vivid vitality, being filled with like dimension and light and radiance. I really got a beautiful picture of sort of that alchemical response when we clean up, when we clear up and clean up and get to sort of that soul level that you were referring to, we become this very vitality, very vivid, very kind of musical,
very alive.
like, yeah, very alive. Like, and I do get geeked out on the energetics. Like,
You do,
I could see, I was picking up what she was putting down. My concern was it clear enough for people who aren't beginners or don't know exactly this, this wavelength of teaching? If you don't live in that landscape, it's hard to follow.
It can be. Yeah, for sure. I think that's why, it was
like
cool.
when you don't know about chakras and you don't know about
Chiron or
astrology
Yeah.
or energy work, or working in what I call the airwaves.
Right.
The people who would know when you say Reiki what you're talking
What
about.
that means. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was good to like break all that down with her and kind of bring it back down to earth for our listeners. So we'd be curious to hear what you think about this episode and how it landed with you. If you felt like, boy, what the heck was she even talking about that whole time? Or if it really awoke something in you and made you more curious and you were following along pretty well.
Yeah. I was really inspired by her. I felt like I think she's speaking to something that's really important, this underpinnings of like this maturation process, but it's I wish I could summarize it the way I want to. I'll have to. I know when I rewatch it, I'll get more
it'll
from it.
come more fine-tuned. Yeah, I think the piece that I really loved that she highlighted was like the Chiron, the soul purpose, and then that Kundalini energy and how it's that 52-year return or thereabouts. So it's like in that range of life, if we haven't been nurturing and following and cultivating our soul purpose, it's probably going to hit our life force energy, our Kundalini, our Shakti in a way that that could potentially, feel very challenging at that point in life. And it's very poignant for me.
Well, and it could just feel challenging anyways because it's sort of the nature of
that time.
These astrological initiations.
Returns. Exactly. Yeah. For me, it felt like a really poignant and timely conversation simply because I've been looking very closely at my soul purpose and having moments of like, okay, yes, this needs to be delivered into the world. I need to keep going. I need to keep forging ahead and making it happen versus maybe I just need to go do microneedling for wrinkles in Southern California where it would be easy and make a lot of money, and so it's just been inspiring. There's been a lot of inspiration coming in for me lately to like, don't give up, keep going, keep forging ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting because I also feel like I went through a portal of contraction looking at the same thing. Like, how hard am I going to work for the little returns?
Right.
Versus, even though I may not get like whatever the status or the whatever feels like would be the most life satisfying success.
Right.
Like, if I could make the biggest impact, broadbanding this way with what's in my heart and soul,
Right.
versus I just want to do what gives me the most space, the most ease, the most money, and the most freedom.
Right.
Because I don't want to work forever and ever and ever.
Right.
I want to pursue the other things I care about, like traveling for pleasure
Yeah.
and spending time with the people I love the most, and not always being in service
Right.
in order to survive.
Right.
And I have made some hard decisions to go, yeah, I'm not going to care about the things I thought I cared about as strongly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do the thing that gets me to that result, which is a change in priorities.
Yeah, it is.
You
And
know?
and that's happening for us now, like at this time in life, right? At
Yeah.
this
And I'm
perfect age.
still open to all of that changing again.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Which
It's all
I
gonna
appreciate.
go with like it's kind of like the thing which I think is similar to what she's saying. It's monitoring the feeling of relaxation. When I am presented with an opportunity, do I feel relaxed, inspired, or do I feel tight and like, oh, I have to say yes? Like, there's all these physical sensations that if we pay attention to, less about the thoughts,
Yeah.
more about the sensations,
Mhm.
then I think we end up making better choices for ourselves. It's hard.
Bingo.
You know,
Yeah.
because all of our conditioning gives us a lot of thoughts
Yes.
about what we should agree to. And I was just, even like small things, like this week, I overcommitted myself
Mhm.
on a couple things, and I had to then call back. And I mean, it sucked because I had them. It's a new person my friend wants me to meet, and we were gonna like go do lunch, and I had them change days, and then I realized, oh God, I'm really overcommitting because I have to go out of town the next day. And I said, look, I'm not sure. And then I went ahead and picked a restaurant that was closer to my house, so I didn't have to drive far away to kind of make it happen. And then I forgot that my best friend is coming into town that same day.
Right.
And like, what am I doing? Like,
You're
I knew in the
overcommitting, yeah.
very beginning, at the very first
You
text, that
felt
was a
it in your
no.
vagus nerve.
It was a fucking no. I can't
Yeah.
commit. But then what did I do? I tried to squeeze myself into 100 boxes
Yeah.
to say yes when I
Mhm.
knew from jump it was a no.
It was a no. Listen to that, people. Listen to your
Listen to
yeses and your nos, no matter what
Boy,
age you're at.
save yourself some time.
Yeah. And energy.
Well,
Much
okay,
love,
everybody.
y'all.
Much love. Toodaloo.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was hosted by Tantric Sex Master Coach and Positive Psychology Facilitator Leah Piper, as well as by Chinese and Functional Medicine Doctor and Taoist Sexology Teacher Dr. Willow Brown. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.